even in the workshop, when you are scripting a play, you are actually studying social science. Because at some point, you are the spectator in the workshop. What do we do? Like our method is scripting play instead of playing the script. So how do you script the play? Actors are the spectators of their own reality. By being the spectator of their own reality, they discover where is oppressor, where is oppressed, and then they script the play. And then what they do? They want to study the ideology of the oppressor, because the oppressor character has to counter the spectator on stage with his logic, with his justification. So we need to study the oppressor character. We need to study the oppressed character. So when you are studying this, in itself, the workshop is giving you a lot of exposure about the sociology of the oppression. So you cannot deprive actors from that experience, because primarily the actors, they will they will lead in the process of including spectators into the activism. So these people need to know more the sociology of the oppression. Oppression is not only economic. Uh, Oppression is also there are like cultural oppressions, other forms of oppression. If you see only oppression from the economic point of view, then you are actually not talking about the complete. You are not talking about the total concept of oppression. And talking about looking at oppression from the economic point of view, from the class point of view only, is also undermining people. Like if you see, our whole politics is rounded, whole activism is surrounded by economic demands. Even the government, state, they think only the economic upliftment is something what the poor people need. But no matter whether they are deprived of art, whether they are deprived of the intellectual space, that is not taken care of in the whole concept of development also. Neither in the whole concept of development nor in our politics, this issue is not an issue really. That how can you establish a political democracy unless if you cannot establish a political democracy, you cannot establish the only economic equality. Without political democracy, economic equality will not stand. And to create a political democracy, what was lacking in socialist bloc, so-called socialist bloc, this was the main lack, that they didn't talk about political democracy. They only thought that only working on at the economic level things will be solved, but not at all true. So in order to create political democracy, you need to create an intellectual space for the people to grow intellectually. So to me, theatre of the oppressed is a space where people grow intellectually. People develop understanding about society. It's not the question of solving a problem. It's not the question of finding a solution. It's a question of debate. People are oppressed because they have no space for debate and dialogue. So theatre of the oppressed is creating that space, dealing with that particular oppression, that intellectual suppression that people have. So they are creating an intellectual space where people, seeing a scene of domestic violence, understands how patriarchy operates in our life. So it's the experience, the journey from experience to theory, as I say. Always the the illiterate, so-called illiterate people, I call them educated people, of course, they go from experience to theory. And this journey from experience to theory, from the results to reason, is an intellectual journey, and in this journey people evolve and develops an understanding about society. That is what I call internal revolution. You have seen in my book. So this internal revolution inspires people to go for a total transformation. Upstage activism, it evolves from this development of intellect within the people.
So can you tell me the moment that you realized that this type of work, the theater of the oppressed, could bring about that internal revolution?
There are two things actually. In one way, I experienced a centralized culture inside political party, where you can see the religiosity, the decision taken by the top will have to be treated as Bible by the rank and file in the party. So that was pure religiosity. But from some religious people, I call them spiritual. From our spiritual ideology, if you see, like for example, there was a great, I call him first leftist social reformer, but he was a saint, Vivekananda. You can see his works here. He in 19th century, when there was a reform, very strong reform movement in this state, West Bengal, because there is a history, because in 1857 there was an army mutiny, and English people were about to lose their control over this country. So then they realized that the education and culture are the two tools through which we can actually establish our rule. This Indian has to feel themselves inferior to us. They should think that we are much more developed and social and advanced. So they introduced the education and culture, and as a result we still suffer from colonialism. In India, if you speak good English, you have the space, otherwise you don't have, no matter how much knowledgeable you are. So during this time, there was a reform movement parallelly was going on. This reform movement was a very top-down reform movement. The people educated by the schools and colleges, they were the leaders of this movement, and there was hardly any involvement of the marginal people. Even when there was famine, lakhs and lakhs people were dying, it was not the agenda of the reform movement. Reform movement was, their perception was built by the British system. So they were looking at the whole reform in the eyes of the British, that this will look better to the British, to my ruler. So that's how they wanted to introduce the reform. And this gentleman said, no, this is not reform. Well, I need radical reform. In this radical reform, what you have to do? You have to give information to the people. And people already have the information, some information. So your information and the information they have, they will collide, they will conflict. And as a result, the knowledge will be, the ways will be discovered. So he said that they only need information. So forum theatre is what? Theatre of the was giving information about an oppression to the oppressed people. They have already the information. They suffer from that oppression. So your information and their information, they are conflicting on stage. And the debate is advancing, new ways and new perceptions, new paths are being discovered. So I realized that two things, that why do they need information? He came up with a very good example, that when the apple fell from the tree, Newton observed it. It was an information to Newton from outside, and he had some information inside. So from the information he had in his head, he started thinking, why did it came down, why did it not go up? So that's how he discovered the theory of gravitation. Gravitation theory was there. It was not sitting at the corner of the room to be discovered by the Newton. It was already there. Newton discovered it. And this discovery took place because of the conflict of information. So information is producing knowledge. That's how the whole human civilization has advanced. So what he said, Vivekananda said that they need information. Because what he said is even more revolutionary, which you see in Paulo Freire's voice, which you hear in Boal's voice time and again, that people are basically intellectual. They are perfect. The perfection exists within the people. Only it needs to be manifested. So how can you manifest? You have to give them information. You have to create an intellectual space. So in that space, they will be able to manifest their perfection. And they will participate. The real participation will take place. And through that real participation, the reform, the change will come.